the Cowboys have no one else, but they also told us they want to go running back by committee. They called him a juice. We got the explosive juicy running back, which I loved, which you're only going to hear from the Jones family. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
School of Scott Rookie Mock Draft Part 2 with Rich Hribar. We rocked a mock draft a few weeks ago, guys, where we were predicting landing spots and trying to make our best guesses as to where guys should be drafted. Now we know everything. This is post-NFL draft. Scott and I are joined once again by the great Rich Hribar. Rich, how much did you enjoy the NFL draft, man?
It was a weird draft, to be honest, and not just with all the ancillary stuff going on with Shedeur Sanders. It was just a very odd draft in general, and I think we kind of thought that things are going to be wide open with just kind of how flat the tiers were in this draft class after the top, and we had some interesting picks, right? Like I think like the day 2 wide receivers were not the order I would have them in largely, but it's not up to me to make these picks. So I'm curious to see how these drafts fall out after the first round. I'm curious, round 2, round 3 rookie drafts, how they go.
And Scott, you've been unpacking all of the press conferences. So this has been like a really, really long few days for you. What's your favorite takeaway from the press conferences all the work you did with Greg Branos?
Biggest would have to be Luther Burden. I was not a Luther Burden guy, Rich. You remember now in, I think, like the dream landing spot, Ben Johnson slot. I'm very high on him. And Pat Bryant was another one where Sean Payton, he compared him to Michael Thomas. And like anytime that happens, you have to make note, you have to move him up your rankings. But like he did not do so lightly. He was like, listen, I know you shouldn't comp a rookie to the guy who holds the record in receptions in a single season, and then he goes on for 5 minutes comparing him favorably to Michael Thomas, all the ways in which they're similar, the ways that he popped on tape, just like Michael Thomas did when he was coming out. And so I buy into that. And, like when a coach is that high on you, has a clear vision for you, and that role is really valuable. Again, the record for receptions in a single season. You have to make note of that. And so Pat Bryant, a player I'm higher on.
Yeah, and Rich, we did a show yesterday with John Daigle and Pat Kerrane, and you mentioned the Michael Thomas, and Pat nearly fell out of his chair because he hadn't heard it before. How about for you, Rich? What was sort of like is there any like post-NFL draft sort of a guy that when you look at it more and more, he's risen up your rankings, or maybe a guy that you're just getting really more excited about that you didn't necessarily think you would be pre-NFL draft?
Yeah, I think I'll stay with the Broncos with RJ Harvey too. I mean, it's interesting, Sean Payton, because the last couple of times he's like really kind of been aggressive on players that haven't worked out. Marvin Mims, we've all lived that Marvin Mims life these last 2 years. They never really found a clear plan for him. He once traded his whole remaining draft for Adam Trautman with the Saints. And, and Adam Trautman was a guy who was like a decorated, small school tight end, but everyone was kind of excited in Dynasty and vaulted him up. And we kind of got holding the bag, I think, on both those guys, TBD on Marvin Mims, but I think he's a positionless asset right now. Like it's kind of hard to get fantasy points consistently that way. But, RJ Harvey, because RJ Harvey was kind of like a nebulous prospect. Like you could have seen him going in round 2, you could have seen him going in round 4 or 5, right? Like it was kind of a wide range with the depth of this class. He gets the capital to a wide open backfield. I'm very curious to see this fit too, especially with the Broncos. We'll see if they add a veteran here, because RJ Harvey was literally the worst pass protector in this draft class as a collegiate running back. And Jaleel McLaughlin through 2 years in the NFL has only pass blocked 14 times. So it's just him, Estime. It's like there's no experience there, and that was a part of the reason why Javonte Williams kept getting snaps last year. Was he was really good in pass protection? They trusted him there, and they kept rolling his dusty ass out there. So I'm really curious to see the fit, but no doubt that when you combine the capital, a Sean Payton offense, we know what he's done with running backs over the history of his fantasy career, and then the landing spot in general. Like he's going to a good offensive line, arguably one of the best defenses in the NFL. Game script should be relatively neutral to keep him involved. There's just a lot of pros where for a player that could have been maybe a second round rookie pick, now he's flirting with back end round 1 and even higher in some capacity, depending on people value him.
Yeah, I mean, there's some leagues where RJ Harvey's going to get steamed way, way, way up. So that was a guy that I think we were higher on collectively as a site at Fantasy Points on RJ Harvey. Definitely a win for us and a huge win for Brett Whitefield, who had him as his RB3 heading into the NFL draft. And now RJ Harvey will go off the board as like the RB3 in some Dynasty rookie drafts. Scott, who was the biggest riser for you? You dropped your rookie rankings article over at Fantasy Points. Who was the guy that rose significantly for you?
Yeah, it was either one of those two. It was probably Luther Burden or Pat Bryant, just based on where I had Pat Bryant buried.
Yeah, Patrick Bryant was sort of a non-guy who is now very much in the third round mix. For me, it was Isaac Tesla, where Isaac Tesla was sort of a guy where I never thought I'd be considering drafting him. But when you factor in this athleticism he has with the draft capital, with the fact that he landed on a very, very good offense, and with the absurd price tag that Detroit gave up for him, where essentially it was like 3 third-round picks they spent on him. Brett Whitefield said that if you use the Jerry Jones math chart, it's sort of like using the 44th overall pick on Isaac Tesla. Tesla's a guy that I'm definitely interested in. And then we look at how these front offices have done the last few years. Detroit's been batting 1,000. They hit a home run on Sam Laporta, hit a home run on Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams. It took a while, but last year it delivered. And certainly Amon-Ra St. Brown, an unbelievable pick, one of the better picks anybody's made on day 3 in a long time. So Tesla's in this weird mix where I want to have access to him just sort of to see what happens.
Yeah, Brad Holmes, look where he comes from. The Rams literally essentially have rebuilt their defense on like day 2 picks, and like he's consistently found dudes there. It's crazy, the success that those teams have had in the later rounds. Remember, John Schneider had like a run like that with the Seahawks, where I assume that's still just variance, and like they ran into some fortune, but they maybe have some secret sauce that no other teams have had in the history of time. I think they're just running pure, but remember that John Schneider had a run like that where like they just crushed day 2 picks for like 5 years in a row, and it basically built up the foundation of that roster.
Yeah, it's easy to bet on guys when you've seen them hit before and like betting on smart people. So we'll see what happens there. Why don't we go ahead and get this thing started? And last time we did a single QB rookie mock draft. Today we're going to do Superflex tight end premium. I think it's going to be a little more reflective of what a lot of people are playing, and it should help the pace of this draft. We're going to give Rich the first overall pick. Scott, you're going to pick second. I'll go third. And we'll keep a traditional beat here, Scott. We're not gonna like reshuffle with like we did last time. We're gonna keep it traditional here. Let's start out, Rich. You're at the 101.
Yeah, I mean, we can just keep the train moving, and you'll just do Ashton Jeanty. I should have just gone rogue to see if we could throw this thing off, just for the sake of everyone tuning out in the first 5 minutes. But JT got the capital, Pete Carroll offense, Chip Kelly offense. Like we know he's going to touch the football just a ridiculous amount. Like open and shut. We'll move on and not eat too much clock.
Yeah. Here's a good question, Rich. You said you don't have any 101s this year in your actual drafts. What would you give up to get Jeanty?
I would be willing to overpay. Last time I was on the show, I thought there was a clear divide. I still think that there's a pretty big gap. So, I mean, I'd be willing to overpay, especially if it's in terms of, just draft picks. And there's a lot of teams that have the 101 that probably aren't Ashton Jeanty away, right? Like they're looking at their roster and saying, all right, I did run into the gold mine here. Like there's a clear player that's valued higher unanimously over the rest of the players. Can I cash out, right? Can I try to rebuild this team? And I mean, you're looking at like probably 3 firsts, maybe a player, so if you can find someone to pay that, I definitely think you that's something you explore, but definitely I wouldn't undersell on him either.
So let's say you are where I am, the 102.
Yep.
You would give up the 102 plus what to get Jeanty?
I mean, I would give 2 futures too.
Oh man. I'm somewhere in between, maybe a 1 and a 2. Two ones. But I don't know. I like Omarion Hampton. That's who I'll take at 102. But yeah, I mean, like Jeanty's such an absolute superstar. I like this landing spot. And yeah, so I think I feel really good about 102. Omarion Hampton for my pick. If you need a wide receiver, I wouldn't fault anyone for taking Tetairoa McMillan or Travis Hunter. I would have it in that order. But yeah, so Ashton Jeanty 1 goes to Rich. I'll take Omarion Hampton 2, and then it's back to you, Theo, 103.
Yeah, great takes that you guys both had. I think it's interesting because the Bijan Robinson year, we saw a bunch of can your roster handle having Bijan Robinson on it, or should you just trade him away? You're not seeing that with Jeanty nearly as much. So, and Scott, with your Hampton pick and the fact that you said, Tet McMillan or Travis Hunter, I think picks 2, 3, 4 have all gotten more valuable post NFL draft. I'll keep it going though. Tet McMillan for me at the 103, and I know a lot of people are on Travis Hunter here at either the 102 or the 103, but Tet McMillan landed so well. We've seen Bryce Young hyper target his number one option when it was Adam Thielen in multiple games and in multiple seasons. Now you get Tet McMillan. They pass on Mason Graham to make this selection. They pass on multiple defenders to make this selection. And Tet McMillan lands on a team where it's such a clear path to the wide receiver one role, and he could end up with like 140, 150 targets in year one. I think I'm taking Tet McMillan over Travis Hunter most of the time, but you could argue against it. Tet McMillan's our 103. And Rich, are you on a Tet McMillan over Travis Hunter, or are you Travis Hunter over Tet?
Splitting hairs, I'm just slightly Travis Hunter still, just because I still have been operating under the principle of just like, why are we limiting this guy? Like that's how I remember last time. I think I took him 106 in this, and it was a 1 QB last time we did this, and that my bull case was just like, what, he's proven us that he's just a different entity up into this point. So why keep doubting that and try to cap him? I will say the one thing about his landing spot, because you see a lot about like, the Liam Cohen offense, which I think is a great fit, and, Godwin and Mike Evans on a per game basis, that they were successful. I will say though, over the course of like recent, like probably 5 to 6 years, we have seen like this archetype of player that's more of like the tweener explosive guy kind of turn into like more of the volatile wide receiver 2-3 when they're paired with like a true alpha wide receiver. We saw the Bengals a year after they got T Higgins, add Jamar Chase. And Jamar Chase has been, the clear lead target in that offense. T Higgins has moonlighted as a wide receiver 1 on a weekly basis, but it's been more of like you want him as like your wide receiver 2-3 on your roster. Devontae Smith with A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle with Tyreek Hill, same capacity. Does Travis Hunter now make Brian Thomas in that ilk, or does it inverse? And I tend to think it would be more the inverse, just based on traditional archetype stuff, that like Brian Thomas Jr. is still going to be the alpha of that offense just because of what he represents. Then you layer in maybe the unknown certainty of just, is there any type of cap on Travis Hunter's routes? I don't think that there's going to be, based on everything that the Jaguars have indicated. I followed Scott's, post-draft analysis, read it, from the coach speak. I will say, any of the 3 picks that we all just took, if you're in a super flex league, you knock on the door of anyone's roster that needs a quarterback. You knock, because everyone's probably like, why didn't anyone take Cam Ward yet? And I think the person that takes Cam Ward will lay out that case. I know Theo was in the same train of a school of thought with me yesterday. But if you are on the clock and you are 102, 103, 104, and you don't need a quarterback, you should at least be exploring the rosters that need a quarterback and just seeing what they'd be willing to pay and see where your move down price and asking price is. I play in over a dozen Superflex leagues now, and I can promise you that I've seen the shift in the recent 4 to 5 years that like quarterback currency is not what it was, 7-8 years ago. It's not as static. It's not as fluid. These guys do not retain as much value, and people do not pay market prices for players that do not perform as rookies at that position anymore.
So which way are you going to go here at the 104, Rich? You mentioned Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter. There you go. Anything to add, or you pretty much laid out? Is there an argument for, like, is Ward at this extreme value, guys, or is this a 105 makes sense? Scott, how about you?
Yeah, I think he's fine. I also think if you don't really need a quarterback, you can go a few different ways with it. 105, you said this tight end premium, right? Yep. I'm going to go Colston Loveland. If you need a quarterback, for sure, take Cam Ward. But, again, like, he got first overall draft capital. That's great. But this wasn't a player Brett was all that high on, kind of consensus. Lance Zierlein, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, they were all saying if this was last year's class, I'd have Cam Ward behind Bo Nix, maybe even behind Michael Penix. But yeah, tight end premium, I'll go Colston Loveland, but really it's just kind of do you need a flex player? Do you need a quarterback? So either way, it's fine.
Yeah, and I will take I think Cam Ward at the 105 is a great value. I think Cam Ward at the 106 is sort of a gift. I think we'll see him inside the top 4 in some leagues, Rich, but I think that the top 4 is pretty locked in. I like the Loveland pick a lot, Scott. I'm very high on him as well, but I'll take Cam Ward at the 106. So our first 6 picks are in the book. Books Ashton Jeanty at the 1, Omarion Hampton at the 2, Tet McMillan at the 3, Travis Hunter at the 4, Colston Loveland at the 5, Cam Ward at the 6. Rich, you are OTC here at the 107. Which way are you going to go?
Yeah, 107. This is Treveyon Henderson for me. I still, even though he was just a couple picks after Quinshon Judkins, I still think what he represents from a fantasy football stance per touch is kind of on the spectrum of a Jahmyr Gibbs or Devon Achane. He doesn't need the 250 rushing attempts because he generates explosives in the run game and he changed the fabric of a passing game. Ramondre Stevenson's been a terrible pass catcher the past 3 years. I think that he's basically going to get relocated out of that role. It is a bummer for Antonio Gibson because I think Antonio Gibson was a good player last year and he's always been a good player any opportunities to get. And it's like this dude he must just like coach's staff must hate this dude. He must be a bad practice player or something. Can never get on the field, but he's effective when he plays. But yeah, I still have Treveyon over Judkins, even though there was a slight draft capital in favor of Judkins.
Yeah, I'm all over Treveyon as well. Scott, anything to add with Treveyon before you make your pick at the 108?
No, I never know how to view these mock drafts. I just took Colston Loveland. Should I take Tyler Warren, and do I actually have another tight end on my team?
Well, yeah, you are like the way we're doing it. Just for the listening audience, is we're essentially 4 different managers, so you don't have to worry about your last pick.
Okay. All right. So just going off of my rankings, it would be either Tyler Warren or Luther Burden here. Technically I've Tyler Warren 1 spot ahead. Love the player. Most yards from scrimmage by any power conference tight end in college football history last year. Landing spot, maybe not immediately great. Anthony Richardson just had the lowest completion rate, the lowest completions per game of any quarterback since Tim Tebow. But I don't know. I'm rooting for Daniel Jones. I actually think Daniel Jones does win that job out, and at the very least, long term, just a great player, good coach. So I'll take Tyler Warren here.
And Rich, about where would you be comfortable taking Tyler Warren now?
In super or tight end premium, like this is still the ballpark. If you're going to see a lot of FFPC gamers still, value these tight ends, they always do, especially when they come with this kind of capital. Pick 10, pick 14. And these situations are largely fluid. Like year 1, you might not love the fit, but if Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones perform to the level they performed at this point of their early careers, like they're not going to be the quarterbacks, and then that stuff changes. And we've seen at tight ends, we've been a little spoiled recently with the recent run of having back-to-back rookies be like tight end 1 in PPR leagues. But we've seen other guys like Trey McBride take like a year and a half to get going, and his value never changed. So I do think that Tyler Warren, I think a lot of people are expecting like kind of year 1, like they'll take what they can get, but are expecting this to be a longer play with him. So that's where I would value him. It's really interesting, the dynamic that you have in non-tight end premium, because you have these 2 players, Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. And I'm with you. I think Loveland's actually landing spot was a pro. Some people have kind of said like, is there just too many mouths to feed, finite number of touches and such. And then you have these 2 running backs that didn't get necessarily the premier draft capital. They got good draft capital in the context of, where we thought they would go, but the landing spots are good. So anytime you have like early round players that get kind of pushed down because people don't love their landing spots, I would include Egbuka in this same range, and he hasn't gone yet in this particular draft. And then you have players that go a little bit later, but go to landing spots that people value more highly immediately, get pushed up the board. My history as a dynasty gamer is that ladder bucket of players almost always been overvalued, and the early bucket has been undervalued. So these like type of landing spots, especially when they come with capital, I look more at the capital aspect than just saying like, oh, I don't really love that Egbuka is going to be, playing with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I don't really love that Tyler Warren is catching passes from Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones in 2026, or Colston Loveland is playing with all these Bears wide receivers. I'm looking at big picture, and I'm saying like these teams clearly loved this player, and they had a vision probably for this player big picture. And I'm going to bet on that winning out long term than in the short term of knocking a player because of just 2026 expected production.
So I'm OTC here at the 109, and I think there's 2 really appealing running backs that I could select, but I'm going to go with Jaxson Dart. I read an article today sort of referencing Brian Dable's thoughts on the quarterback situation and trying to unpack when Jaxson Dart would actually get on the field, I think it might be like really, really early on, and I think he might win out the job in training camp. Brian Dable was very quick to point out to the media that Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson are also sort of inexperienced in this sort of a system, and kind of shut the door on these guys are going to necessarily be ahead of Jaxson Dart. When Dable was in Buffalo, they went with Josh Allen in his second game. It was a blowout loss in game one, and then they went with Josh Allen. Certainly, there's a huge delta between the draft capital, but I think when it comes to Jaxson Dart, he gives the Giants the best chance to be a high-scoring offense this year. I also really like his mobility. Daniel Jones had over 700 rushing yards in that first season with Brian Dable, and also the scarcity of the quarterback position with the rest of the guys. We might not say another quarterback's name until like round 3, late round 2. So I'm going to comfortably take Jaxson Dart here at the 109 ahead of a few appealing running backs. And we are back to Rich OTC here.
Yeah, this Jaxson Dart's going to be really fun to see where he goes in these super flex leagues. I mean, the history of these background first round quarterbacks is absolutely dreadful. Absolutely, we have the Lamar blow up, but I was going down the list with it. It's a quarterbacks picked 20 or later in the first round: Kenny Pickett, Paxton Lynch, Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Brandon Whedon, Tim Tebow, Brady Quinn.
Stop it, Rich! You're making me feel terrible about my pick.
Jason Campbell, J.P. Losman, Rex Grossman. Then you have the three that like hit Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers big ways. So you're hopefully you can get in that strike zone.
There we go.
And then you have Jordan Love, who we had to wait like 3 years, who was a clear like developmental, like that was a longer play for the Packers, but not a great list. But so it's gonna be interesting to see. Like he's a guy like I would be like kind of if I was on the clock in your spot, like again, just knocking on the door of people that need quarterbacks. Like, hey, what do you want to do with this pick? You need this guy because there's a clear drop off after Jaxson Dart. Like you'll see, I mean, who knows when we'll get to the next quarterback, like in Superflex. So I would absolutely just be knocking on Jehovah Witness all the way. I'm just pounding on doors. You need Jaxson Dart.
11.
Yeah, so I struggle with this. Like Danny Kelly and I co-manage a team that is absolutely stacked, but our quarterbacks suck. It's Superflex. We just have Anthony Richardson, Aaron Rodgers, no one else. And so we need a quarterback badly. And we just couldn't talk ourselves in to Jaxson Dart. We couldn't talk ourselves into Tyler Shough. I mean, we ultimately took him, but it's not a great class. And like, look at the Giants, right? They're tied for worst in Super Bowl odds, right? And so if they're picking top 3 next year, they're going to take an Arch Manning, a Drew Allar, a Garrett Nussmeier. You also have Lenoris Sellers, Cade Klubnik, Nico something from UCLA, Carson Beck, all guys projected to go in round 1. That usually doesn't happen, but you heard this too from the Browns when they made that decision to trade Travis Hunter. They said a lot of what went into that is, well, we evaluate the quarterback class for this year, but also next year, and so like they're trying to trade up to draft a quarterback in next year's class, which looks so much better. And so, yeah, I struggled with this, supposedly weak quarterback class, and obviously Rich's stat isn't great.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the other arguments being made is if Jaxson Dart shows well enough under Dable, does it buy Brian Dable another year, Scott? Where like they might not like. And again, this is unpacking a bunch of doors here. Dart would have to play well enough that they would pass on a very appealing 2026 quarterback class. But if Dart comes out and plays well, let's say the Giants win 7 games, does it buy Brian Dable another year because they wouldn't want Dart to have to learn under 2 offensive systems in 2 years, which is a tough putt for a young quarterback. So I don't know, a lot to unpack here. I think
that's a huge question I had. And I brought this up with Coach Speak Index when we recorded is like, the assumption of rational coaching is false. It's like, what's even stronger than that is the assumption of like self-interested coaching is what preserves their job. And like, what makes the most sense for them? Is it to, start Jaxson Dart right away? Probably not. Is it to give Jaxson Dart like only 2 starts where it's like, oh, you can't fire me because, you didn't even get to see what I did with this young rookie. And like you said, it's, oh, are you really going to bring in a new coach with a new system? Probably like halfway through the season, bring him in, I think is the best guess. Maybe like don't even start him at all. What do you think, Rich?
I will say this about the Giants. This roster is better than I think people on the surface think it is right now. And
I
obviously,
agree. I agree.
and a lot is contingent, obviously, on the performance of the quarterback. That's a given, right? Like we seen the New York Jets basically crush the draft for 5 years and it didn't matter. Like, and now they have all these like contracts coming up of all these rookies that they were successful picks and they have to pay them all, but they were never able to get in the playoffs because of quarterback play. So the quarterback play obviously still big red, kind of red flag here. They need to get quarterback production. But as a whole, this roster, I think like this is a team that I'm very curious when I look at like their win total. Like they have the worst schedule in the NFL this year too. That's the other thing too. Our strength of schedule, when we don't have the order, but we know all the opponents. They have our 32 ranked strength of schedule. This is the other kind of red flag here too. It's like, damn it. But I do like this roster. I think their defense is going to be really game. I mean, their defensive line is on paper is excellent. They add, Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo, who is probably one of the better values, I think, in free agency in terms of signing. Obviously they just land into Abdul Carter at 3. So it's like, man, like they've got some pieces here. And like, they got hit on Neighbors last year. Darius Slayton's like an undervalued, like real player versus like probably fantasy player. So I think the Giants could be sneaky better than like people think. Obviously they just got to have that quarterback play, but it's tough because when you look at like the history of like these early round quarterbacks, almost everyone's gotten a coach or coordinator fired like recently. I mean, Caleb's whole coaching staff gone. Drake May's coaching staff gone. Bryce Young, year 1, coaching staff gone. Stroud went 2 years, offensive coordinator gone. Kenny Pickett, offensive coordinator, gone after year 1. They try to recoup year 2, doesn't happen. Trevor Lawrence, early career, they fired. They moved to Doug Peterson. Now he's on 3. Like it's tough to bank on these guys that you already feel like lame ducks actually saving their value, because it just doesn't really happen often.
Well, Rich, you are OTC here at the 110. A couple of appealing running backs on the board.
Yeah, this will just be Judkins by default. Here, I mean, I think Judkins is one of those guys too that like, having a team invest in him that highly. I think we were all kind of a little surprised he went over Henderson probably, but hey, that someone did it. He also walks into a system that, on paper, the Cleveland Browns are telling you they want to run the football this year. They kind of were getting away with that in the post Deshaun Watson trade. They were trying to, and some of that was game script, but they also were like their neutral, pass rate was swerving more into the pass. Everything they've operated this year has said like, no, we're going to bring this thing way back in. They draft 2 running backs. They obviously add a tight end. They don't know what their quarterback situation is. This is a team I think it's going to be a lot more conservative. They're going to run the ball a lot more than they have the last years. Hopefully the offensive line can stay healthy because that is a potential ticking time bomb with the Browns. This offensive line was once one of the best in the NFL. Now everyone's gotten old kind of at once, and everyone was hurt kind of the past 2 years. And now they got some contractual stuff that's up against the wall. I believe Wyatt Teller is an unrestricted free agent this year. Their center is as well. So there could be some kind of rollover there, but just based on the draft capital and like initial, opportunity in terms of volume, I think this is a spot that I would just gladly throw that at the wall here.
Scott, you're here at the 111.
I'm going to go with the Luther Burden. Again, not a player I was very high on, but just Ben Johnson, slot wide receiver, just has me drooling. Definitely watched the post-draft press conference series with Coach Speak Index. We went all the way back to 2022. That was the most actionable press conference above and beyond Ben Johnson. Just, wow, this guy is incredible. He asked the beat writers, have you seen the highlights? 2022, he says, the slot wide receiver is paramount to my offense and what I want to do. You can just use them in ways that you can't with the other positions. It's harder for a defense to take away. I got my start in Miami, and we had Jarvis Landry, who led the league in receptions his first 4 years in the NFL. And then Amon-Ra, this presser I'm quoting, Amon-Ra St. Brown only had 2 100-yard games in his entire career. And he's saying all this about the slot. Amon-Ra goes nuclear. And so, I had separation concerns. I don't think that matters as much when you have Ben Johnson scheming him up. So I just see massive upside here. Maybe he was throwing some shade at DJ Moore in the more recent press conference. But Luther Burden, I just think the upside is sky high. So I'll take him here.
And I will close out our first round with RJ Harvey at the 112. It's fantastic value. Obviously, the landing spot is fantastic. We like the profile heading into it. We love the second round draft capital, and we love the Denver Broncos landing spot even more. He's steaming up when it comes to early redraft, early best ball. And he's a guy that's got a wide range inside of most first rounds of Dynasty rookie drafts. I think in some leagues, he'll go as high as like the 106, 107, and he's really a lock to go inside of the first. So let's quickly recap it. Ashton Jeanty went first, Omarion Hampton second, Tetairoa McMillan third, Travis Hunter fourth, Colston Loveland fifth, Cam Ward sixth, Treveyon Henderson seventh, Tyler Warren eighth, Jaxson Dart ninth, Quinshon Judkins 10th, Luther Burden 11th, RJ Harvey 12th. Rich, before you make your pick in the second round, what do you have going on right now content-wise?
Yeah, I'm doing everything over at Sharp Football Analysis still. Post-draft, obviously, of the rookie rankings. I also got the rookies all into Dynasty ranks, and those are freshly updated. I also have the rookies fresh into the top 250 for, super flex PPR, half PPR, tight end premium for seasonal ranks. And I have all of them in projections as well. So all that stuff's kind of was up. That was what I worked on like over the post-draft, Saturday into Sunday night, making sure everything was clean, because all the degenerates are on Underdog and BBM. They're firing off these drafts already. You already see these maniacs out here firing up teams. So everyone's got their finally moving downhill towards the 2026 season. So make sure I have all of those initial, kind of thumbprints in place for you to kind of get out of the blocks.
Yeah, no Underdog in New York still. So I'm sitting here like it feels completely weird to not fire off a bunch of Underdog drafts post NFL draft, but I'll travel at some point. I'll be able to get them in. Rich, get your first pick in the second round in.
Yeah, and I just want to say I do like the one thing too about we're doing this blanket where we don't have teams and we're kind of just ranking these guys. The one thing about you taking Harvey at the final pick at 12, I think it makes sense for those guys like him and Kaleb Johnson into that area of the draft, because those teams that are largely picking with those draft slots are probably competing teams. And, you're getting another player to, kind of fuel your playoff push, right? Your championship push immediately. So like the player that I think if I was blanket just ranking players like from a dynasty stance with no team context, I would say like, all right, Emeka Egbuka is the guy I would want. But if I'm picking 111, 112, and I'm looking for like a hole or like immediate needs, like I do think like a Harvey or Kaleb Johnson makes sense for those types of rosters to try to make that push, right? Because you're just going to probably get more 2026 production out of those guys. Now, like I said, I let off the show with the kind of saying like those guys are potential traps. We had a history of those guys being traps. But I think if you're just pushing for a championship, it makes sense to add those guys and take that upside outcome of year one to try to cash in those chips. That's why here, like I'm now picking at the 201, which is theoretically a bad roster, where we're trying to build this thing up, and that's why I say I'll play the longer game with the first round capital guy and Emeka Egbuka. He is very similar shades of now what we've done for 2 years in a row, right? Rome Odunze goes to the Bears with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. We're like, where are the year one targets? He had some targets. They weren't very efficient, but again, the play out was he was capped by those players. 2 years ago, we had Jaxson Smith-Njigba get drafted to the Seattle Seahawks, going to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Same story, right? Like took him. It's the same. It's like the same thing, and it's like a third year in a row. We have another first round wide receiver falling into a depth chart where he's going to have to fight for year one production. Is probably going to be capped by two veteran players that have just been established football players ahead of him. So the 2026 projection for Emeka Egbuka is going to be very contingent on, how much contingency value he has. Now, he does fall in a spot where we have a player in Chris Godwin who hasn't played a full season since 2018. Mike Evans is 32, going to be a UFA next year, and has a hamstring injury in 4 straight seasons. There might be some opportunity. They just ran 170 plays without both those guys in the field last year. There could be more year one opportunity here than we assume, but I am still placing him more underneath that bracket of what we saw with Odunze and JSN. And those guys cost you top 3 rookie picks. Egbuka is going to cost you probably a back half first or early second.
Scott, you were OTC here at the 202.
Is Kaleb Johnson off the board?
He's
still there.
He's still there.
All right, I'm going to take Kaleb Johnson. Watching those pressers, one thing you kept hearing over and over again was this is a volume back. This is a running back who gets better the more carries you give him. Arthur Smith cited his fourth quarter yards per carry. Mike Tomlin called him a volume back, said the same thing, and GM, same thing. So not worried about that. Yeah, he's not going to get a lot of targets, but we kind of knew that based on his collegiate profile. But yeah, I think he could be Najee plus for you. So I'm going to take Kaleb Johnson here.
And I am in a very high level FFPC single QB draft. And Kaleb Johnson went at the 107 to a guy who's made a lot of money playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. So I think that as the week moves along, you're going to see a lot more Kaleb Johnson inside of round one because people are unpacking sort of the ceiling outcome here and the potential for volume with Kaleb Johnson. For better or for worse, he is going to steam way, way up in Dynasty Rookie Drafts. So I like that pick, Scott. And I will continue being our resident Matthew Golden guy here.
We set it up for you.
Thank you very much, guys. I will continue going to war for Matthew Golden, the first Green Bay Packer first round wide receiver since 2002. The very, very fast Matthew Golden. Forget about the Zapruder film. The Packers believe the 40-yard dash time. And it's really one of the only outcomes for Golden where it's a team where you can envision him potentially being the number one option in the passing game. So I think Green Bay has a plan for him. Very reactionary from getting beat down in the NFL playoffs and having Jordan Love throw 3 picks and they only scored 10 points. They go get Matthew Golden. I'll happily take him here at the 203. Rich, back to you.
Yeah, this is kind of that's like a cutoff for me. Like I think everyone that we drafted, there's I think a pretty clear divide, and we're definitely going down tiers, and we're kind of in more of hope. We're in more of the wish casting portion of the draft.
I disagree personally.
Oh, really?
I think we got 2 more.
2 more?
Picks. Maybe three.
This is where I would take Jayden Higgins, though.
Okay, he's one of the 3, not one of the 2.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you're doing it based on draft capital. I think this is a spot where you have some volatility here in terms of, we've seen Nico Collins miss time the past 2 years, and he could step in and probably have some contingency value there. I do think he's roadblocked from getting that type of usage, though, that I think is going to be a necessity for him to max out a ceiling for fantasy football. I think this is still a player that is probably going to be archetyped now into kind of that prototypical X wide receiver. He can't get away from Jaylen Noel, stealing the interior routes from him that we'd love for like a player like that to get access to. I mean, Scott just laid out the Luther Burden stuff. Like, you need that type of dual usage now in the NFL for a fantasy football to like crack your ceiling. Like, you need that versatility. You need to be a zone beater. You need to get some power slot reps. You don't need a lot of them. Like, if you can get like 20-25%, that'd be huge. But he's probably going to be roadblocked in terms of target tree from Nico Collins. Nico Collins is just the offense is going to run through him. Obviously, I said like Noel and Christian Kirk are probably going to block him from getting those power slot snaps. So he's a player I was high on. I actually like the landing spot a little bit less than I probably was hoping for, even though the capital is there.
Scott, you mentioned you think there's a few players here. I think I could guess it's 2 running backs, and then there's a wide receiver that I think will also go in this range. Which way are you going?
Oh, it's for sure running back, and you can name the 2. We were in a draft together, Theo, and co-managed with Danny Kelly, and I have Cam Skattebo higher in my rankings, but right behind him is Bayshull Tuten. We took Tuten just because Danny wanted his first Tuten share, and then you sent me a trade, and you were the pick behind me, so I ended up getting the guy I wanted, Cam Skattebo, plus a little extra, and I'll take Cam Skattebo here, who went to my Giants, Rich's son's beloved Giants. Like the landing spot.
I asked him if he was back, man. I said, "Are you back? Carter, Dart, and Skattebo. Are you back?" And he's like, "I might be back."
You got to get him a Skattebo jersey. I got to order mine ASAP.
Yeah, and Scott, I think you're like 4 for 4 in mock drafts with me where you've taken Skattebo this offseason. So, yeah, know your league mates. I knew I'd be able to squeeze out Tuten for Skattebo in that trade. And I split that team with Dan Williamson, really, really good FFPC manager, also podcast host of Stack Hunters. And Dan is very high on Tuten. I'm very high on Tuten. And I know you're super high on Tuten as well, Scott. So I think that I'm also into Cam Skattebo in this range. I think he's also a similar bet. But my argument is Tuten has a smaller hill to climb. I think that Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby are going to be less resistance than Tyrone Tracy, who actually looked pretty good last year under Brian Dable. So that's sort of my tiebreaker. I think the ceiling outcome this season, I think Tuten has a higher ceiling outcome between the 2 of them if like everything works out perfectly. So I will go back-to-back running backs here. I will take Bayshull Tuten, and I can kind of guess Rich's pick here too. Where your OTC?
By the way, Tuten, great landing spot. He went to the Bucky Irving guy, right?
Yeah.
He's great at getting guys in space. So exciting.
And even Tuten's another one of those guys that's an extension of what we talked about with Treveyon Henderson. Like, even if Tank Bigsby does have 125 to 150 rushes of his own. I mean, Tuten's a guy I think that on 200 touches could still be a viable, RB2 plus. And then obviously you have the ceiling outcome of he either relegates both those guys or then 2026 relegates those guys.
Rich, are you diving into the wide receiver who might hear his name called earlier in some drafts?
I'm going to go wide receiver. I'm going to go Tre Harris here. Just based on the spot. He's another guy who's probably going to be just a prototypical X, but he falls into a spot where there's a clear hierarchy of where he fits in terms of the offense, right? Like, he's basically could be Justin Herbert's new Mike Williams in a sense. And you've got Ladd McConkey doing all the Keenan Allen stuff, and obviously it's a different system, but they mesh together well, and they really pair together well in terms of where they're going to be on the field. So he gets attachment to a good quarterback. Probably will get efficient targets. Will get a ton of value. But remember, Ladd McConkey was not like a 25% target share guy, though. He was like a 20 to 22% guy. And they were even targeting Quinshon Judkins during this period, which is crazy. But so if he can just float, like push Quinshon Judkins down year one and get to like an 18 to 20% target share, he could probably flirt with like being like a volatile upside wide receiver 3, even this year.
No, for sure. Tre Harris, we talked about it, Scott and I, when we were on a Football Guys pod with Dave Kluge and Alfredo Brown. Scott, you made a point that if he just took over the Quinshon Judkins role, he could end up having a ton of success. I think that's the appropriate way to look at this situation. Add your Tre Harris thoughts, Scott.
Yeah, so I don't see that. I see him taking over the Josh Palmer sacrificial X role, where Palmer wasn't all that productive despite being an ass guy for us, average separation score. I don't know. I with these prospects, you want to balance the pros versus the cons, and like if you only look at the pros, Tre Harris, based on his draft capital, is like a player you should take. I don't know, mid round 1. You look at the cons, he's like UDFA. And Rich and I could talk about this all day. Is upside matters more than downside is detrimental. But I
round, especially like when you're here, like
right. I can't help myself be a little bit hater and
it is what the tide shifted on Scott's Tre Harris affection. It's funny, you ran the whole gambit this offseason.
That's right.
A lot of podcasting with Brett Whitefield. Brett is big time anti Tre Harris. Adjusted slightly, but not a full adjustment, even though the landing spot is pretty sweet. Scott, you are OTC here at the 20th overall pick.
Yeah, I'm going to take Elijah Arroyo. It's tight end premium. This is Brett's pre-draft tight end 3. This is my post-draft tight end 3. The press conference was awesome. It sounded like the Seahawks were talking about a 21-year-old Kyle Pitts. They said the coaches thought he could play the X receiver position for them. They asked, well, what about all the missed time? It's like, yeah, that's why we got him here. If it wasn't for all the missed time, this is a player talent-wise who's probably going top 15. So really high in Elijah Arroyo. This is a 21-12 personnel offense. So people are like, why didn't they draft a wide receiver? You have MVS as the wide receiver 3. It's like, yeah, he's not going to get much play, but you are going to see, hopefully, a lot of Elijah Arroyo. So really like this pick in tight end premium.
Yeah, I think it's a great value. And I think the fact that there's multiple tight ends that people are into has created like a little bit of indecision for drafters. But I think if you can get Arroyo in this range, the back half of the second round, I think it's a guy who could be on your dynasty roster for a long time, especially in tight end premium. I'm not going to go with the tight end here. I'm going to go with wide receiver. I'm going to go Jack Bech, who I think is one of the last really appealing wide receivers for me. Scott, you had an unbelievable stat talking about Trey Tucker and his routes run with Jack Bech. And I think that's really the only argument people need to be making. So I'll point out that Jack Bech has size. He has versatility. Brett Whitefield and I both thought that the Vegas wide receiver 2 spot was like a free square for any of our, rookies we kind of like to land into. But your Trey Tucker stat is absolute fire. It was sixth, right?
Yeah, Tre Tucker was like 5th or 6th in routes run last year. And if he was just league average in yards per route run, that's like a 1,000-yard receiver. So this looks like a great landing spot for Jack Bech. One thing I'll say, Pete Carroll's coming in, so fewer routes run, more pounding the rock, especially with Ashton Jeanty there. But still, yeah, it's a great setup. You don't have anyone else besides Bowers and Jacoby Myers. So can't hate on this pick at all.
Rich, we have 3 more picks to go in the second round. Start us out with the first of them.
This is the area where I'm just gonna throw Kyle Williams at the board and see what happens. Just I think it's a very polarizing player that could have a wide range of outcomes, but a lot of people that I know that know football more than I do really loved him, and I really love Drake May. So I like the idea of this type of portion of the draft, just kind of taking a shot to see, because it's wide open for him to get targets in year one. It's wide open for him to get targets in 2026 and beyond if he is that good. So at this point, like, I just want to shoot for the upside. I know it is tight end premium, but I still think like a lot of these tight ends they just don't really project to be very good players in my eyes. So I don't like to chase. I don't want to chase just the format with the guys that are just, I don't view as like really good prospects.
Scott, you are back OTC.
Yeah, I feel like super flex. Yeah, you have to consider Tyler Shough here. So I'll just say I'm QB needy, and I tried to trade for an Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, giving up like a round 3 pick or something. I couldn't do it. QB needy. Shough, I don't really believe in the player, but I think he starts week 1. I think Derek Carr could miss the entire year. And so, I mean, Saints are probably drafting top 3 next year, but yeah, Tyler Shough begrudgingly.
Notorious Tyler Shough hater Rich Hribar is on the pod. So, Rich, go ahead and blast Scott's pick.
This is a guy. This is what you do. You're always the guy who like soaks up the gross quarterback or who go early, or is that only pre-draft?
Yeah, I try to do it usually pre-draft, but Shough in general for me is just the no mobility factor, I think, is a huge problem for me. In terms of just like what, even if he hits, I just don't know what we get, right? And I don't know if he's a guy that can really increase his like draft trade capital, right? Like if Shough starts, what if he starts the whole year, right? Like I think that's probably on the lower end, but like let's just say he starts all year and he throws 16 to 18 touchdown passes, and the Saints are in a spot to draft another quarterback. Like, are they not approaching that again if they're picking top 10? Like, I don't know if he's a guy that can really, I don't really know if he increases his stock. Typically in these types of super flex leagues, like I would say like maybe you throw the dart at Jalen Milroe and that he could increase his stocks. Like if they move on from Sam Darnold, which essentially could be a 1-year deal, if he's that bad, and we enter the next offseason as Jalen Milroe is going to get a chance to start, then his draft capital or as a trade currency goes way up, because everyone knows the mobility factor at least is a floor. But that would also be a huge selling point for me because Jalen Milroe can't throw a football. I know he does. He can throw a football better, but we've seen this archetype of quarterback. Even me being the Swami of Konami, like eventually you get exposed. At least like we've seen it with Anthony Richardson through 2 years, Justin Fields. Like you have to be able to drop back and play in the pocket to get second contracts in the NFL or to consistently start games. And I do think that's going to be a big picture concern for Jalen Milroe. But I do think if he is to enter like the offseason where like he made 4 or 5 starts at the end of the year, he'd be one of the guys that could talk to two QB gamers into saying like, yeah, I'll throw something at that dude and try to get him right. Maybe try to run into the next Jalen Hurts or something, because that archetype of fantasy quarterback's been so profitable in the past, even from a floor stance. That's the difference between like throwing darts, I think, at him and Shough. But I would bet that Shough starts more games than him in year 1.
And I'm going to close it out with Jalen Milroe. I did this yesterday as well. And in my article, I have Milroe in this range. A lot of because of what Rich said, I think he's a cash out guy where if he gets the opportunity to start, there will be people in your league that are going to pay a lot more than this pick for him. Or you can just use his utility, because if he's on an NFL field starting, he's going to score fantasy points because of his incredible rushing ability and explosiveness with his speed. So I'll take Jalen Milroe here. It's a little bit of a dynasty game theory type pick, trying to turn something into a more expensive asset. And there are a number of tight ends left where if I want to take my shot at a tight end, I think I'll get one in the next few picks as well. So let's quickly recap.
Preseason DFS, is Jalen Milroe the highest owned player?
Jarquez Hunter, preseason DFS, right at Nick. Let's recap this second round. Emeka Egbuka at the 13th overall. Kaleb Johnson goes 14th. Matthew Golden goes 15th. Jayden Higgins 16th. Cam Skattebo at 17th. Bayshull Tuten 18th. Tre Harris 19th. Elijah Arroyo goes 20th overall. Jack Bech at 21. Kyle Williams at 22. And then back-to-back quarterbacks to close out with Tyler Shough and Jalen Milroe at 23 and 24. Rich, you're OTC at the 301. You're not going to take Shedeur Sanders, but who are you going to take?
No. I'm going to throw a dart on Jayden Blue here. He has some real squint to see it, maybe poor man's Devin Achan, qualities, like, at this portion of the draft. Very poor, very squint to see it. But he was a guy that actually has a really good rushing profile, like in terms of yards after contact. And Achan was one of these guys at Texas A&M who was an undersized back that also was like really good post contact. And was good creating, after contact. And then you come with the receiving factor. Like, he's going to immediately step into that receiving game role in Dallas. So he's got a chance to, I think that even as a rookie, maybe catch 50 passes this year. So like at this spot, like I'm just going to throw a dart here at the nebulous backfield and just see if I can hit. And if not, it's an aim small, miss small pick, I think.
42 catches last year at Texas, 6 receiving touchdowns. And the guy runs like a sub 4.340. Ran a 4.38 at the combine. Texas Pro Day was like a 4.28. Scott, your thoughts on Jayden Blue? I know he rose up your rankings as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Cowboys have no one else, but they also told us they want to go running back by committee. Mm-hmm. They called him a juice. We got the explosive juicy running back, which I loved, which you're only going to hear from the Jones family. But yeah, it wasn't super high on the player. I think the landing spot, that was the clear place where it's like, well, they don't have any good running backs, but I don't know that today they have any good running backs and they want a committee situation. I'm going to go with Terrance Ferguson, tight end premium. This feels easy. Sean McVay comped him to Chris Cooley, said he had movement abilities similar to Travis Kelce. They were clearly very high on him, very athletic tight end. You always want to stay invested in a Sean McVay offense, just so rare, uncanny ability to produce league winners and ones you didn't really see coming, or at least, draft capital didn't imply high odds of that. And so, yeah, this is easy. Terrance Ferguson.
And I'll keep the tight end run going, and I'm going to take Harold Fannin Jr., which I think these guys will go pretty much side by side. And in some leagues, these guys will go right next to Elijah Arroyo. But Harold Fannin Jr. gets the 67th overall pick landing spot, a huge win for him draft capital-wise. He's only 20 years old, too, with Harold Fannin. I think there's a little bit of room to run in this profile. At 2026, you could easily see him taking over, and David Njoku is playing for another team. Harold Fannin Jr. off the board. Rich, back to you.
Yeah, we're kind of in dead man zone here.
You didn't like that. You didn't like that Fannin pick. I know you wanted him right
there. Yeah. I probably should have taken him because Blue would have been there. Like, read the room a little bit. I could have just gone Fannin.
In my head, you're a huge Isaac Tesla guy, just because you brought him up to me before anyone else. This is like one of the first, and I'm like, why is he talking about Isaac Tesla, who had like 16 career targets? He went to Hillsdale College, which I legitimately thought was an online college.
Yeah. I was like, do you see this dude from Hillsdale?
Constitutional expert Isaac Tesla.
Yeah. So here, I mean, yeah, I guess that this would be a spot where I'd be looking at him or Pat Bryant, right? And I think I would probably lean Tesla and just bet on maybe, some things open up with like Jameson Williams. Maybe Jameson Williams, because of all the things he's had happen to this point in his career, is not a player they're comfortable giving a big contract to after this year. Maybe, I don't know, and he gets some more runway moving forward. The thing about the Pat Bryant one that scares me is just like Denver, like through 2 years, man, like they just can't make up their mind on what receivers they want to play. Like they just rotate all these dudes, and we've seen some legit vagabonds like get in the rotation, like Lil Jordan Humphrey, and like it's like I feel like we're going to do the same thing this year. Where, granted, it's just a 1 year, and if Courtland Sutton was to leave, Pat Bryant could step into a bigger role. But like I feel like we're going to see Courtland Sutton be the guy that is on the field like every play. And then it's just a wide gap where you see some Marvin Mims, you see some Pat Bryant, you see some Devon Vele, you see some Troy Franklin, right? Like it's going to be the same thing. Like I feel like it is going to be very similar, and probably in a team that's not going to throw a ton of passes, from projection stance too. But yeah, I guess Tesla, but yeah, you could take Mason Taylor here if you wanted just to chase the premium and hope Justin Fields is gone. It's kind of no man's land. It's kind of just shoot your shot. What's your flavor here?
Well, Scott, are you Tesla's off the board? You're going Pat Bryant here or someone else?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I get all the concerns, and it wasn't a player.
But it's a third round pick. It's a third round pick.
Yeah, and the invocation of the name of Michael Thomas is just the upside is just too drool inducing for me. And so maybe that committee was just like none of these guys are really good. Marvin Mims I love, but maybe not the profile of a, full-time wide receiver. So yeah, I'll go Pat Bryant here.
And with the 30th overall pick, I will go Jarquez Hunter, who
Nice.
is probably my favorite third-round bet running back out of this class for Dynasty Rookie Drafts. I think that this is a situation where he could just be better than Blake Corum and be the handcuff. And we haven't seen an extension to Kyren Williams. Brett Whitefield also brought up maybe this is the year where we see McVay change and go with a little bit more of a two-back approach, a little bit more of a committee than we're used to in a Sean McVay offense. He's made changes in the past. This is all Brett Whitefield, but Brett talked about how he went from exclusively 11 to a lot of 12 personnel. Maybe that's sort of the way to protect the longevity of Kyren Williams, not give him quite as much volume. And for me, Hunter's just also really good. He's a low 4.4 guy. He had 1,200 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns last year. He's immensely strong, powerlifting background, and they moved up to get him. So I like Jarquez Hunter a lot. I think it's good value here. Back to you, Rich.
Yeah, I like that too. I do think some of the stuff that the Rams did was personnel driven last year, just the amount of injuries that they had at the wide receiver position. But they do come in at a tight end and a running back, right? Like Tyler Higbee's probably going to be gone, and Kyron's probably going to be a tough keep though, right, for agency, because I think if you're Kyren Williams' agent, you're looking at his counting stats and you're saying, pay me this, because this is a dude that's scored 35 touchdowns the last 2 years. Like you're saying, like, no, my guy's worth this. It's the same thing that James Cook is doing already, planting the seeds. I just scored 20 touchdowns. Pay me this. And I think the Rams are probably going to balk at that, right? They're like, dude, like we've just been printing any type of running back that we put in our system. Like why would? So I think it's a little more insured. Say if a Kyron's going to come and ask for like $15 million a year, so long, buddy. Like good luck. Like go score your touchdown somewhere else. And then that opens the door for Hunter, immediately in 2026 to have a shot. So I do like that, kind of taking a shot there. At this spot, I guess by default of just here's where I'd take like a shot on Mason Taylor. This is a player I don't think is particularly going to have the ceiling that his draft capital suggests or initial draft steam suggests. I know people think he's a player on the rise, but I do think he's going to be a limited player. He's not a player that creates a lot of explosive plays. He doesn't break a lot of tackles. He's more of like a ham and egger. And sometimes that could be good. If you can get 120 targets at a tight end, that could be good. I think that though we've seen him a year removed from Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., and he still didn't command a lot of targets. So I think that's a concern here. This would just be a pick based on the format and kind of what's on the board. And maybe I could try to cash out on him if he's the second on a team in the Jets this year in targets and be able to cash out on that player.
Another 20-year-old tight end as well. So I think a lot of people projecting him, including myself, for a big role. 21-year-old tight ends, it's a tough bet to make, but I think it is reflective just based on there's no one besides Garrett Wilson there. Is there, Scott?
No, that's a good call.
Okay.
And NFL bloodlines, son of Jason Taylor, nephew of Zach Thomas. And apparently the NFL really cares about this because you had a ton of players who had NFL bloodlines, and he brought it up in the post-draft pressers, where maybe that's the thing. Like I always laugh about how, people give NFL coaches like a hard time for the nepotism aspect. But it's like all the best coaches were nepotism hires. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Bill Belichick, the list goes on, where it's like, maybe it's like an apprenticeship sort of thing, right? Like, all the best Renaissance painters all had, their father was a painter, the apprentice very young. And so all this to say, I would give Rich Hribar's son a job at Fantasy Points just based on the name and the Giants fandom. I'm going to have to go Jaylen Noel here. Obviously he's probably the wide receiver 4 in his own team. It's really just a long-term bet on talent.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very good value here. And if Rich is correct and Higgins is a guy that doesn't hit, it's sort of an arbitrage play for him around later. And, heading into the NFL draft, I had Noel and Higgins neck and neck. So I think, Scott, that's a really, really good one. Just as a way to sort of preview my guest for Fantasy Football Daily, Sean Siegel is all over Jalen Royals. So I'm going to listen to Sean Siegel being a smart guy with his dynasty takes. But there's a lot of media there saying that if Rashee Rice is slow out the gate, the Jalen Royals selection could essentially be like a handcuff, and you could see him in that Rashee Rice role. Now, certainly it wouldn't be a direct usage role, But I think Jalen Royals was a guy that I thought would go on day 2, now lands to a top-notch offense. And with the Rashee Rice question marks, I think Royals is a guy who might score more fantasy points in 2025 than his draft capital reflects. So I'll take him off the board here.
I thought that was an interesting conversation even before the Royals pick, was just how are we going to handle the Chiefs wide receivers with Rice coming back, because Xavier Worthy took off for fantasy, or found stable footing for fantasy, the back half of the season when he got some of that Rashee Rice type of usage, and it was like, if Rashee Rice is going to come back, is Worthy going to lose that? Some of those near the line of scrimmage targets. And so I thought the Chiefs wide receivers were already an interesting conversation coming into this offseason, and adding Jalen Royals. Rashee Rice did post like a super workout video this weekend. Did you see his hype video?
I did not, but I'm definitely gonna check that one out. I think it's more this is more like the media speculation. So I don't think it's anything coming from Rice or necessarily the Chiefs, but it's the media speculation about the injury. So yeah, I don't know, but to your point, Xavier Worthy, if he's slow out the gate, might also be just incredible usage like we saw at the end of last year.
Well, I mean, these are guys that are going like wide receiver 20, wide receiver 21, almost back to back in early redraft leagues. And, people are just kind of like, they don't know what to do, right? They're just sort of putting them, kind of lumping them next to each other. Because Xavier Worthy, when he was just used as like a downfield asset, really struggled to score fantasy points. Like, to consistently score fantasy points. So if he comes up and needing that player, Mahomes is a guy that, interesting enough, like the last 2 years, like his accuracy and connection rate on like throws 10 yards and further downfield has been at the bottom of the league. Which is pretty wild to think about, because when we last left off in the Super Bowl, that ball he threw to Worthy was absolutely bonkers, absolutely insane. So it's kind of weird, but I do prefer, like, on a brass tacks, like surface layer, like just betting on Rashee Rice, like a guy who's already performed at a ceiling level of the Chiefs wide receivers. So I've been kind of approaching things that Worthy might be a little bit overdrafted, but if Rice were to like miss the opening month of the season, then kind of all bets are off on that front.
So Rich, this is your last pick of the draft here.
Yeah, I actually had Jaylen Noel ranked way higher and just missed him on my list. Like,
nice.
So, like, I had Jaylen Noel even higher than Isaac Tesla. So I apologize to everyone that saw me pick Isaac Tesla over him.
We'll put it in the show description, Rich. We'll make a note. We'll protect the rep.
And the next highest guy on my board is Dylan Sampson, just to throw a dart at, to see if, he ends up creating like a 2-pronged backfield with Quinshon Judkins, or could eventually just run into some production. So he'd be like my next guy to just throw a dart at this point.
You've essentially handcuffed your Quinshon Judkins pick as well. Scott, which way are you going here? Your last pick of the draft.
Yeah, things are gross here. I'm going to go with Alec Ayomanor. Fell due to medicals, but, Brett loves this guy, so that's good enough for me this slate.
Yeah, and I'm sort of stuck here because a bunch of names that I thought would be here are not, because you guys are definitely very, very sharp. I'm going to go DJ Giddens because I'll take a redraft mentality, and Jonathan Taylor's missed time in multiple seasons. DJ Giddens is a guy we really like coming in, and I think this is a guy that the redraft community is going to be all over as a guy that they don't want to leave their drafts with, because it's a offense we're projecting to be very, very run heavy. Jonathan Taylor misses some time, and DJ Giddens is sort of that really, really appealing high-end handcuff. So it might be a short bet, but if I get starts for him this season, this pick really, really helps me. So DJ Giddens is in fact our Mr. Irrelevant here. Rich, let everybody know once again what you have going on.
Yeah, just kind of all wheels up now, focused on the 2026 season. Now that the drafts and the books and rosters are like 90%, taken care of. We'll see some veterans here kind of impacts some things. We already saw the ghost of Deontay Johnson pop up. And it's interesting that for a guy that didn't want to play for Carolina or a Super Bowl contender in the Baltimore Ravens last year, let's see how he does with the 5 quarterback, the 5 quarterbacks the Browns have. See how motivated he is to practice for them during the week. But, we'll see some guys sign. Nick Chubb, obviously, is going to get some post-draft steam. We'll see if J.K. Dobbins lands anywhere. Guys like Amari Cooper, right? Some veteran landing spots. But other than that, like, we're pretty much locked in on kind of where we see these rosters shaping up and what teams have told us how they view their rosters, approaching kind of the season. This is it. So all that stuff's in place, projections, rankings, all that stuff. We'll update it for injuries and, kind of more news over the summer. But it's kind of just full speed up. The NFL doesn't take any breaks. We're here already focused on the season.
Scott, let everybody know about the podcast you've been putting out and the articles as well.
Yeah, you can read like 35,000 words on the rookies, or if you just trust me, you can check out my rankings, paywalled article over at fantasypoints.com. Coach Speak Index and I watched a million post-draft pressers, so you don't have to. So you can check out that series on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple.
Yeah, and check out Dynasty Life this week. I'm going to have Heath Cummings on. We're going to talk about our rookie rankings there. And also Fantasy Football Daily, Sean Siegel of RotoViz coming on. We're going to talk about rookie draft strategy. You can find all my articles over at Fantasy Points as well. Been a really, really fun process here with all this rookie content we put out here at School of Scott. Now it's time for you guys to go crush your Dynasty rookie drafts. Check out all the great stuff we have over at Fantasy Points, and we'll see you next week.
Boom.